Just this last month in Chennai, and the folks in Chennai could back me up on this. The schools were shut, so kids had to stay at home. Offices advised employees to stay back and work from home rather than come to office, and even some commercial establishments were hit. And no, this was not because of some communist protest in Chennai. It was actually because of a water scarcity problem that hit the city. This is not a one-off. Even in June 2018, this happened in Shimla, for instance. And Shimla, being a tourist town, actually suffered because of it, because the tourist inflow had to be regulated, hotel bookings had to be cancelled. And as a result, obviously, the local markets, which actually depend on tourists, were hit because of a lack of water. In fact, even the case of Bengaluru, from where I'm now speaking to you, if you go to areas like Martharli and Whitefield, people actually have very tiny windows from which to draw water, and then they don't have water available to them for long periods. So this is a very grave problem, and it's a lot of people are suffering because of it. Just to make this a bit more concrete, let me give you some numbers. Right? If you look at the composite water management index released by Niti Aayog last year, it said that about 600 million people, which is about more than 45% of the country's population, suffered from a water scarcity level that varied from high to extreme. Over 70% of the water available in India is said to be contaminated, and each year over 2 lakh people die because they don't have access to safe drinking water. Now, if we continue to go about our merry ways, this problem is going to get worse and worse. Already the supply and demand of water are completely out of whack. If you take this into the future, say till about 2030, what you're going to have is a humongous gulf between the demand of water and the supply. Now, the two most important questions that I can think of with respect to this problem is, what is driving this problem? What are the factors, what are the causes underlying the water crisis in India? And the second question obviously is, what can be done at the domestic level and even at the policy level? So to address these two questions, today on this episode of Swarajya Standard, I have my colleague Tushar Gupta joining me, and we will direct these two questions to him. He's written a wonderfully comprehensive story on this matter, and he'll be able to shed more light. Tushar, thanks for joining us today on this episode.
Hey Karan.
Can you just first of all address the first question, that is, what are the causes, what are the factors driving this problem in India?
See, there's no one cause to the water scarcity problem in India.
Right.
What you saw in Chennai and Shimla was not scarcity of water, but actually results of acute mismanagement over the years.
Right.
In Chennai, the problem was that the local water bodies had dried up; they had not been managed.
Right.
In Shimla, it's a very good tourist spot for all North India.
Right.
So the water management was very poor, and that took a toll eventually on the water resources.
Right.
However, if we go beyond the urban areas of India and everything,
Right.
the actual problem starts from agriculture. Karan, you must understand that agriculture consumes 80% of the water demand in India.
80%.
80%.
Right.
Right. So whenever we start talking about conserving water, managing water resources, it has to start with agriculture.
Right.
Now I have some points here. I have some data I'd like to share with you.
Yes.
The first problem when it comes to agriculture is the groundwater resources.
Wow.
Now for a majority of the agriculturalists in India, irrespective of the size of their land holdings,
Right.
groundwater is, they see it as an infinite resource. They
Correct.
do not think of its conservation, they do not think of its management.
Right.
I'll tell you, over 54% of India's groundwater levels are declining.
Right.
Over 54%. And of these 54% wells, they are in 15 states. Now,
Right.
15 states together, they have more than 50% of the population.
Right.
So already you're talking about some 650 million people with declining groundwater resources. That's the
Wow.
first problem.
But just correct me if I'm wrong. We don't even have adequate data in terms of actually
No.
the groundwater levels, right? We could be exaggerating the estimation as well.
Actually, Karan, the problem is we could be underestimating the
Right,
numbers here.
right,
Because the index that was released by Niti Aayog, even they suffered from the same problem.
Okay.
Because of India's geography, it is not really possible to quantify all the groundwater resources.
I see.
So the sample they had on the groundwater resources was actually a few percent. It was between 1 to 5%.
Right.
So we do not have any knowledge about the other 95%.
Wow.
But what do we have is a knowledge of the trend on how groundwater is being exhausted.
Right.
So safe to say we might not be exaggerating the problem here, we might be actually underestimating it.
Right.
Right?
Can you go into, so agriculture is of course the biggest factor. What can be done? What do you think can be done in this regard?
See, again, I'll have to give you some data.
Right.
Now, India, we love our agriculture, we love our farmers. The farm loan waivers are, a tool to win elections. Now, here's something. The size of over 80% of the land holdings in India is less than 2 hectares currently.
Right.
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 So, a majority of the farmers do not have a lot of land to work with.
Yes.
So, what happens here is what can work out actually here is two things. One, you have community irrigation practices.
Right.
Okay. People come together, pool in their resources, manage water in a way that it's, used intelligently.
Right.
Right. Now, take this for example. A farmer owning a land less than 2 hectares
Right.
has no incentive to go for water conservation because he's barely, making a profit selling his crops.
Makes sense.
So he would not care for water conservation.
Right.
However, if 5 farmers with a land holding of let's say 2 hectares each come together, you have 10 hectares of land,
Right.
and they can pool in their resources to conserve water, probably reuse water for irrigation. Right?
Right.
Talking of reuse, sustainability is a very important factor if you have to go forward,
Right.
especially in agriculture. If you're not having sustainable farm practices, let's say drip irrigation, and even the Prime Minister has stressed a lot on this front, that
Right.
we need to start learning from sustainable farm practices. You need to grow the crops you want to, you have to.
Right.
Food security is important, so we cannot just do away with farms and crops.
That's right.
But we have to find way to have a sustainable way of catering to our agricultural needs
Got
in
it.
terms of water.
Got it. I hear you.
Right?
Can we shift the discussion now to the urban areas quickly? What do you think in terms of our urban use of water can we do?
See, the problem with the urban water management, as we saw in Chennai and Shimla, we
Right.
have live examples, it's clear mismanagement.
Okay.
And Chennai and Shimla are just 2 cities. In India, as per the data from the Niti Aayog, over 60 crore people residing in different states. There is no policy whatsoever for urban water management.
Right.
There is no way how to reuse the water. There's no way how to recycle it for other purposes.
Right.
There is just no policy. In the absence of policy, neither the lawmakers nor the local agencies see any reason for water conservation.
Right.
So what you saw in Chennai and Shimla were not anomalies. They were actually results of policy absence and mismanagement.
Right. Do you have any idea, just last question, very briefly, do you have any idea what that policy could look like?
See, to begin with, it has to start from agriculture.
Okay.
The problem of having a water policy in India, Karan, is you have to start with the farmers.
Right.
And that can quickly boil into a political issue.
Got it.
Right?
Got it.
You
And
have a state
politicians
election.
wouldn't want to risk that.
No politician would want to risk their political capital for water capital
Right.
as things are right now.
Right.
But you have a Chennai-like situation every year,
Right.
and suddenly people are going to wake up to the idea that okay, we need to really start thinking about using our water intelligently.
Yeah.
And agriculture is where we need to start. You have 4/5 of the water being used up there.
Exactly.
You need to start rethinking the crops you grow.
Right.
You need to start rethinking the way you farm your lands.
Right.
You need to start rethinking people in rural and urban areas drink water.
Great.
Consume water rather.
Great. As you can see, the situation is grave. It's dire, and something really needs to be done. We need to review our water use, whether it's in the rural areas or the urban areas. And right now, what seems like a danger can actually even be looked at as an opportunity, because if India has to hit that $5 trillion mark by 2030, we have to first fix the water use, because that's going to play an important part in making that happen. So that's all I have for you in this episode of Swarajya Standard. I'll see you again tomorrow.